All right, guys, this is going to be a video for section 1 of Asteroid Destroyer. Now, depending on how you decide to start the game, this might look a little bit different for you. So in Google Classroom, you should notice that before Asteroid section 1, there are 2 Asteroid Destroyer demos. Those are basically if you want to start the game from scratch and load in all of the assets yourself. The other option is there is a game file in there, just a starter file that has the assets already loaded in for you. And so that's where I'm starting here. I'm basically starting from the point that all of this stuff here is preloaded in. So if you download that file and open it, it should look exactly like mine. It's got all the sound files in there. It's got all the assets in there and everything like that. If you decided on your own that you wanted to load in all the sprites yourself, those first 2 demos just show you how to do that, okay? So basically, if you're at this point where your sprites and assets are loaded in, you have a blank canvas, your size is set, you should have one layout called game, and you should have an event sheet called ES game. And remember from the breakout game that the event sheet is just where we program our events and tell the game how to work. The layout is where we actually see our objects on the screen and we can basically place them where we want to, okay? So the first thing we're going to do with our Asteroid Destroyer game is we're going to put our spaceship onto the layout. So if you scroll down in the upper right here in your project window, find the spaceship, just click and drag it and put it on the screen, okay? Now, if I double click the spaceship, what you're going to see in here is that there are going to be multiple frames, okay? And there are different colored spaceships. Now, animation frames can be used in multiple ways. One way is obviously for something to animate. So let's just use this as an example. If I click on default animations, I get some properties down here in the right. And I could change the animation speed. So let's say I give it a speed of 20, and then maybe I tell it to loop. That means that the animation is going to repeat. What it's going to do, it's going to take all these different colored spaceships and it's going to animate it. So if I run my game, you'll see it looks like it's glowing basically because it's just cycling through the animations very quickly. Okay, that's one way you can use animations. Once again, to get into that window, you just double click your object and that takes you in like this. Okay. Another way to use it is maybe I want these frames to be available to me, but I only want my ship to be one color at a time. In that case, what you do is you change your animation speed to 0, and then loop doesn't need to be on. Okay, so then what happens is the animation frames are here, they exist, but since the speed is 0, it'll just get stuck on whatever frame it's on. Okay, so you can see frame 0 is yellow, frame 1 is blue, frame 2 is green, etc. So let's say I want my ship to be green. If I have the ship highlighted and I go down here into the properties window, there's something here called initial frame. And if I change that number to like 2, you'll see that it turns green because frame number 2 right here is green. So then I could control what color my ship is. For this, I'm not doing anything that requires you. There's nothing that's going to require you to make your ship change colors. I just wanted to show you this as an option. So if you don't want to worry about the ship changing colors, you could just pick whatever color you want and you could actually just delete the other frames out. So if you wanted to, you just highlight the frame and press delete. You can delete the extra ones out if you don't think you're going to do anything with other colors or don't want to. Even if you're unsure, it's okay to leave them in there. Just make sure that the animation speed is 0. And then down here in the properties, you just set the number of the frame that you want your ship to be. Okay, and that's all you really have to do for that part. Okay, our spaceship now is going to need a couple of behaviors. We need a behavior to allow it to move, and we're going to do another behavior that's going to make it so we can control what happens if the ship leaves the screen. So with the ship highlighted, scroll on the left side here and click on the behaviors button. We're going to add 2 new behaviors. So we're going to add one that's called custom movement. So you can scroll through and try to find it, or I just like to type in the first few letters here in the search bar, and then it pops up. So here's custom. And I'm going to add another behavior that's going to be called wrap, W-R-A-P. Okay. Now there are multiple movement behaviors that could work for this game, but we're going to do custom movement. Now, what custom movement is basically it's got some commands that we can give it, but it doesn't have like anything preset. So if I were to run the game like right now, the ship won't move. Custom means you have to completely program the movement in manually. There are other behaviors like you'll see later on in the Flip the Robot Monkey, like called platform, where you just give it the behavior and you can already control it right away because it's got preset commands. Custom movement doesn't have that, so we'll program that all in manually. The wrap behavior, what that does is if an object leaves the layout, it's going to wrap around to the other side. So when we're playing it, when the ship moves and leaves the top of the layout, he's going to pop up on the bottom and pop out there. Left to right, same thing. If it leaves the left side, it's going to pop out on the right side and come back into the layout. So basically, if an object has wrap, it can never actually leave the layout. It just re-enters on the other side, kind of like there's a portal there. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some events to allow our spaceship to move. So what you're going to do on the right is find ES game and double click it to get your event sheet here. And we're just going to start by adding some groups to organize our code. It's very, very important that you create groups and you keep your code organized because it's going to help you for debugging. So like if you find an error somewhere, it's going to be easy to locate the code where that is. It also just helps you for knowing where to go if you want to edit or alter something. If this is just a big jumbled paragraph of code, it's going to be really hard to identify certain areas that you want to edit, especially as your games get more complex. So it's good to keep things in groups so then you can minimize the groups, you can reopen them. It makes it a lot easier to navigate. So we're going to make a group called Spaceship Movement. To add a group to your event sheet, you just right click anywhere on the event sheet and you're going to go to add group. Okay, and our group is going to be called Spaceship Movement. Okay, and in programming, I like to not use empty spaces as kind of programmer etiquette when you're labeling things, naming things. You typically don't ever use empty spaces, so I like to separate my words with just a capital letter in between instead of an empty space. Um, when you're naming an actual file, you can use spaces if you want to. I think technically here the group name, the space won't cause an error, but I just get in the habit of doing things without spaces because in a lot of instances, the computer doesn't like when you use spaces. So I just get in the habit of not using it. Okay, and I'm just going to click OK. So now I have this big group here called Spaceship Movement that I can start putting code in. Okay, so the other thing is in order to make the ship move, I need to use the keyboard to do that. Well, right now, the computer doesn't know that we want to use the keyboard, so we have to add it into the game so that we can actually use it. So to add the keyboard into the game, um, we're going to go to this object type window here on the right. You're just going to right click on that and you're going to add a new object type. And the object we're going to add is called a keyboard. So if you just scroll down a little bit or you can type it in, you're just going to double click the keyboard. Now the keyboard isn't something you physically see on your layout, but it does appear here in the object window. So it's just saying that that keyboard is an input type. So it's a way that the computer can receive information. And now that we have it in our game, we can actually code with it over here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add an event to the spaceship movement group. So all you have to do is just click this little button right below the group name. It says add event to spaceship movement. So we're going to click on that. Okay. And then we're going to do a keyboard command. So you're going to double click on keyboard. Now, if you don't see the keyboard here, it means you missed that last step. You didn't actually add it into the game. So go back, rewind a little bit, add the keyboard into the game, and then it will appear here. Double click keyboard. What we're going to do is we're going to do key is down. So it's going to be this one right here, key is down. A lot of kids by mistake click this key code is down, which is a completely different thing. It just needs to be key is down, not key code. Okay. Then you're going to click and you're going to choose what key that you want to be pressing, and we're going to do the up arrow to start. So all you do is you press the up arrow on your keyboard and then you click OK. So now this event says that when the up arrow is down, that's the condition, and then we add an action to that to tell the computer what to do when we hold the up arrow down. So when we hold the up arrow down, we want the spaceship to move. So we're going to figure out how to do that with custom movement. So I'm going to add an action here. We're going to click on the spaceship, and then we're going to do something called accelerate. So we're going to accelerate. Now, we have a couple of options. We can either accelerate, we can accelerate toward a position, or we can accelerate toward an angle. We're going to have it accelerate toward an angle. And then we have to tell it what angle to do it and what the acceleration is going to be. So for acceleration, we're going to put in 100. Okay, and that just means it's going to accelerate at a rate of 100 pixels per second. The angle is going to be self angle. So start typing in the word self and you should see it pop up here. You always want to double click on the suggestion because right now we're actually writing code. And if it's not written exactly how the computer wants it, it won't recognize it. So if that S right there were lowercase, it wouldn't work. So I always click, if it gives you a suggestion, you always click on it. So we're going to do self, and then we do a dot or a period, and then angle. And you can see angle popped right up. Okay, and it should be green, and then dot, and then angle should look regular like that. Self dot angle means it's going to be whatever angle the ship is facing. So our ship is going to be rotating, right? So normally, if we just had our ship accelerate at a rate of 100, by default, objects move to the right. So no matter where the ship was rotating, the ship would just move to the right. So by telling it to accelerate at self dot angle, it's going to look at whatever angle the ship is facing and accelerate in that direction. So that piece of code is really important there. Okay, now we're going to do one for left arrow is down. So I'm going to add another event to spaceship movement. We're going to do keyboard. We're going to do key is down again. We're going to click, and then we are going to do the left arrow key. So I just pressed it on the keyboard, and then I click done here. So what we're going to do when the left arrow is down, we're going to rotate the ship. So I'm going to add an action for the spaceship, and we're going to do this one up here that says rotate counterclockwise. And then it's going to want to know how many degrees. So we're going to do 125 degrees, but we're going to do something that's called times delta time. So you're going to do shift 8 to do the multiply symbol. Then we're going to type in dt, and you can double click on it for delta time. Now, don't worry about what it means yet. We're going to get it programmed in, and then I'm going to show you and explain why that's important. So we're going to click done there. Okay, so basically when the left arrow is down, we're rotating counterclockwise. So when the right arrow is down, we're going to want to rotate clockwise. Now, as you get more savvy with programming and you get more used to it, you're going to want to take shortcuts so you can program faster. So when you're comfortable with it, if you notice you're doing events that are very similar, you can just copy and paste them. You don't always have to remake them. So if we know we have to do a keyboard right arrow event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to copy this one. So to copy this event, what you have to do is you have to highlight it. Now, when you're highlighting events, there's 3 ways to highlight it, and it's really important you pay attention to this. So if I click over here, this spot right here is just the action, right? And notice that only the action is highlighted. So if I were to like copy and paste this, it would only copy the action. Or if I wanted to move it, it would only move the action. Okay. If I click in this area here, this is the condition. So this is the condition that needs to be met. This is the action that happens. Notice when you click on either one, it only highlights one or the other. And this can get confusing because if a student wants to copy like the whole event or move the whole event, a lot of kids click right here. And let's say I want to move this event above this one. Well, it doesn't work. It like moved it inside of this as another condition. It didn't really do what I wanted it to do because I only grabbed the condition, not the entire event. Okay, so just be aware of that. Most of the time, if you're copying and pasting and moving, you're usually doing the whole event. So see how there's this little empty space here on the left side? If I click that, notice how it highlights everything. That means now I have the whole event. So if I wanted to move this event above, now it moves the whole event above. Okay. Likewise, if I wanted to copy it, it's going to copy the whole event. So click here, make sure the whole thing is highlighted. There are 2 ways to copy. One way is I can hold down Control on the keyboard, and I can just click and drag and move it right above until I see a black line, and it copies the event like that. The other way you can do it is you can click on the whole event, right click in the same spot, and you can click copy, right click the same spot again, and then you can click paste, and then it will paste it right underneath it. So either way you want to copy is fine. Just kind of choose what you like to do. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this event. So to edit the actions and to edit the conditions, you just double click them. So I want to change this from a left arrow to a right arrow. So I'm just going to double click on this, and I'm going to click on left, and I'm going to just press right on the keyboard to change it to right. And then here, I need to change this from counterclockwise to clockwise. So if I just double click this, I'm going to have to click back to go back a step, and then I'm going to do rotate clockwise. Okay, and I'm going to leave the 125 times dt. All right, so let's just test what we have so far. So if I run my game, right now if I press right, you can see it rotates nice and smooth to the right, rotates nice and smooth to the left. If I press up, the ship moves. Now there's a problem here. My ship is kind of moving from side to side, not really how I want to. We'll fix that later. But right now, let's just look at the rotating. So see how I have that nice smooth rotating? Watch what happens if I take the delta time off. So I'm going to take the delta time off of this one. So I'm just going to say rotate at 125 degrees counterclockwise for left. So right, I left with the delta time, and left does not. So watch what happens here. So if I move to the right, you see it rotates nice and smooth. Now here's without delta time. Okay, you can see it just goes crazy fast as possible, kind of like a buzzsaw, right? So when a computer executes an event, so like this down arrow is down, as long as the down arrow is down, it's going to execute it as many times as fast as absolutely possible, as much as the frame rate will let it, okay? By adding this times delta time on there, that's just basically telling it to move at an independent rate regardless of what the frame rate is. So basically, by putting delta time, we're adding the restriction and saying, yes, we want you to rotate, but just do it at a normal frame rate. Whereas if we take that off, it's just going to go bananas and go as fast as it absolutely can. So that's why that times DT is really important to put on there. Okay. All right, one more keyboard command we're going to add. We're going to do down arrow to brake, basically, so that we can slow down. So you could copy any of these events and edit. I'll just do it from scratch just as a reminder. So add a new event to spaceship movement. Okay, we're going to do keyboard. We're going to do key is down, and we're going to click, and we're going to choose the down arrow. Okay, and then I'm going to click done. So now I have down arrow is down. And then to brake, what we're going to do is we're going to add an action for the spaceship. And we're going to type in accelerate. And what we're going to do is we are going to click accelerate, and we're going to leave it on forward. But for the acceleration, we're going to do negative 100. Okay. So the reason why we're doing negative 100 is because we're saying accelerate forward, but then negative 100 means it will go in the opposite direction. And because up here we said accelerate at 100, basically accelerating at negative 100 is going to do the opposite of that, which is going to simulate braking. So let's just try it really quick, make sure it works. So forward and then back brakes. Yep, perfect. And it just comes to a stop basically. All right, so that's working. We're good to go there. We've got all that. Let's go ahead. Let's just fix our spaceship right now just because I have it on my mind. So if you notice, my spaceship was kind of flying to the right, right? So I'm going to double click this. Basically, when you're in the image editor here, so you just double click on your object to do it, the computer considers the right to be the front of it, okay? So all we have to do is on your spaceship, you just have to click this rotate button right here, and it will rotate to the right. Now you'll notice on mine, if you decided to keep multiple frames, that it only rotated the one. So you could click on each frame individually and rotate them, which would be fine. But I'm going to show you this trick here. If you have a lot of frames that you want to rotate at once, what you can do is you just hold down Shift while clicking the rotate button, and it just rotated all of them. So as long as whatever you want the front of the ship to be, make sure that that's facing the right, and then you're good to go. So now my ship will rotate here, but now when I run the game, you can see that it makes sense and the ship is actually moving in the direction I'm telling it to, which is what I want. All right, so we've got that part fixed. All right, let's go back to our event sheet. Now we're going to just do a couple of start events. So what I like to do is if I'm not using a group, I click this black arrow to minimize it. You can see it keeps it nice and clean. I'm going to right click down here in the open space. I'm going to add another group, and we're going to call it start events. Once again, you can use a space or not use a space. It just depends on what you like better. But I just get in the habit of not using the space, like I said. And then the start group, we want above spaceship movement. So I'm going to drag that up above until I see that black line. Sometimes it's hard dragging something above something. So you could have taken spaceship movement and dragged it below if you're having trouble with that. Okay. So now I'm in the start event group here. And then I'm going to make an event in here called on start of layout. So I'm just going to add an event to start events. It's going to be system, and it's going to be called on start of layout. So on start of layout, we're basically going to spawn asteroids in. Now the issue is on my layout, whoops, over here, no asteroids exist yet. So even if you're spawning something in, later on, it still has to exist on your layout somewhere. So for now, I am just going to take an asteroid and I'm just going to put it on the layout just so one exists here. Okay. Our asteroid does need some behaviors because right now, if I were to run the game, it just sees it as an empty sprite. So it's just going to sit there. It can't move. It can't do anything. And we need the asteroid to kind of move independently. So there's 3 behaviors we're going to give our asteroid. So I'm going to click behaviors on the left side. Make sure the asteroid is selected first. Click add new behavior. We're going to give them a behavior called bullet. I'm just going to go to the search bar, type BUL. It'll pop up right away. We're going to give it rotate. So I'm going to add another behavior called rotate. Okay, and then I'm going to add another behavior called wrap, which is the one we used earlier. Okay, so what the bullet behavior does is it basically will make an object by default kind of fly in a straight direction like a bullet. Rotate is just physically going to make the sprite rotate and spin. And then wrap, as you know, will make it so if it leaves the layout, it pops up on the other side. So now we've got those 3 going right there. Now you'll notice I'll put the asteroid here. When I run it, some things aren't going to quite look right. So you can see how it's kind of like spinning in a big circle. And it's kind of trying to move at the same time. But what we want it to do is we want it to just spin in place. So we're going to change some properties. So I'm going to click on the asteroid. We're going to go on the left side here in the properties. Okay. So first thing we're going to look at is the bullet speed. We're going to slow it down a little bit. So instead of 400, let's go to 40. Okay. And then this set angle, this is the part that's making it rotate in a big circle. So what set angle means is if the angle of the object changes, it changes the bullet angle to match that direction. So it actually is rotating, but it's trying to fly in that direction at the same time, which is what's making it like loop out in a big circle. So if we turn set angle off, it means that its bullet angle will act independent of the actual angle that it's rotating. So now that's going to mean that it can rotate on its own axis, but then the bullet angle can still do its own thing. So if I run it right now, you'll see it's just slowly flying to the right, but it's rotating with the rotate behavior. So this is more what we want. And bullets by default will always fly to the right. So we're going to do some coding to have it like change angles and all of that. But that's just how the bullet behavior works. All right, so that's good right there. So we're going to want to have the speed randomized a little bit. So we're going to go to the ES game event sheet, and we're going to add a global variable. So to add a global variable, you just right click in the open space and do add global variable. And we're going to call it asteroid max speed. And this should all be one word, no spaces. And we're going to set the default value at 50. Okay. What we're going to do, so this global variable is basically just a number that we can assign and use to things, and we can kind of code with it and have it change. Um, you'll see later on why it's important that we're doing that, okay? So let's just see where we're at here. So we did that, we did that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our layers down here in the lower right. Right now it's called layer 0. We're going to rename it main. So you can right click it and click rename, or if you just single click it like I did, it'll highlight. And we're just going to call this main with a capital M. That's going to be our main layer that all of our main objects are going to be on. Later on, we'll add a background layer to this, but for now, I think we're going to keep it just like that. Okay. Now that we've put the asteroid on our layout, now on this onStart of layout, we can do a couple of things. So the first action we're going to add to this is we're actually going to destroy the asteroid. So we're going to do asteroid and then destroy. Okay. Now this might not make sense to you, but the reason why is we're going to actually have the asteroids spawn in off screen, and they're going to like float onto the screen so it looks more natural. So anytime you do a bullet or something that spawns, you typically like lay it off screen so you don't see it when you run the layout, and you typically just destroy it right away so that it doesn't interfere with the game. So we basically have it here so that the computer has a reference, but then we destroy it immediately, and then we have a clean start so that we can spawn in other asteroids the way we want to. Okay, so that's why we do that. So then to spawn an asteroid, we're going to add another action to this onStart of layout. We're going to do system, create object. We're going to choose the asteroid. And then it's going to want to know what layer and what X and Y position to start it at. Okay. So for the layer, I'm going to type a quotation mark and it's going to show me my layer options. And since I renamed that main, I can just double click that. So I want to spawn it on the main layer. And then the X coordinate, what I want it to do is I want it to spawn randomly anywhere from left to right. So remember, the X coordinate is anywhere from left to right on the axis. So to make this spawn randomly anywhere from left to right, I'm going to type the word random. And then I'm going to do a parentheses. And then I'm going to type in the word layout. And we're going to do layout width. And then I'm going to do a right parentheses. Okay. Now, if you're following the presentation that you're reading along with, I think it says window width, but in Construct 3, window width isn't like a proper command. And then they have viewport, but then that doesn't work either. But layout width in this instance works fine. Basically, our layout is what? It's 1280 by 720. So the X coordinate is 1280. So random layout width in this instance says it's going to be a random X number between 0 and 1280. That's basically what this is saying. Okay. Now the Y coordinate is going to be a little bit different. Just follow along with me and type this in. It'll seem confusing at first, but then I'll explain it. So the Y spawn is going to be different. We're going to type in int, and that stands for integer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a parentheses, and then we're going to type in the word choose. And as you type in these words, double click on the option down here or press enter on it. Don't type it in manually. Then I'm going to do another left parentheses. Whoops. I pressed the wrong button there. We're going to do another left parentheses. And then we're going to do negative 90, comma, negative 25, 825, and then comma 890. Now these numbers don't have to be exactly what I put in, but they do have to be within a certain range. So we're just going to type that in as a base, and then you do 2 right parentheses at the end to finish it. If you do it correct, just double check yours, make sure it looks like mine. The number should turn up pink if it registers correctly. Okay. So random layout width basically means they're going to spawn anywhere from left to right. This equation down here, what this means is, let's look at this first. It says choose. So for the Y coordinate, remember that's up and down, so the higher or lower parts of the screen. It's going to choose to be either negative 90, negative 25, 825, or 890. Okay. And then int just means that it's going to make it an integer, make sure that it's a solid number. Okay. Honestly, we probably don't even need to have the int here because we're just choosing between solid numbers already. So I honestly don't know why they have you do that. I'm just following the presentation basically, but you probably could just say choose and then put those numbers in. I don't think you have to have the int there. But we're going to press done on this. Okay. And let's go to the layout. So if you guys remember, um, the upper left corner is considered 0, 0 as the coordinates. And if you look at my cursor here, see where it says mouse? You can see this is the X coordinate and the Y coordinate, and they're constantly changing as my mouse moves. So you can see the X and Y coordinate of my mouse. So you can see if I put my mouse in the upper left, it's pretty much like 0, 0 or really close to it. Okay. X starts at 0, and as I move to the right, it increases. So here the X value would be 1280. Okay. Y, basically 0 is at the top, and as you move down, it increases. So 720 is my height. So if I move down to the bottom, my Y value here is about 720. Okay. So for X, we said random layout width. So the asteroid is going to spawn anywhere randomly from left to right here. Okay. Now for the Y, we gave it 4 different options. It could either choose negative 90, which is going to be like somewhere up here, negative 25, which is a little bit lower. We chose 825, which is going to be somewhere down here. And then we chose 890, which is going to be a little bit farther down. So the purpose of this, those Y coordinates, it doesn't have to be those exact 4 numbers, but what we did was we chose 2 different numbers that would spawn somewhere above the layout and 2 numbers that spawn somewhere below the layout. So basically what that means is the asteroid will spawn off screen, and then we're going to make it float on screen. The reason I want to do that is it looks really awkward if asteroids just randomly appear in the middle of the layout out of nowhere. The other reason it's important they need to spawn off screen is we don't want the opportunity that an asteroid could spawn on the player. That's going to feel really unfair to the player to have an enemy just spawn right on top of them. So it's really important we do that. So that's why those Y coordinates are important. But you could do you know, it wouldn't have to be negative 90, negative 25. You could do negative 30, negative 150, negative 180, whatever, as long as it's off screen and it's not going to take it forever to reach the screen. Okay, so that's what that code kind of means there. Okay, back to the event sheet here. So we're still on our on start of layout. Now what we're going to do is, so the asteroid's going to get destroyed, then it's going to spawn a new one in that random location. Then we want the asteroid's angle to kind of start flying towards the player. So we're going to add an action for asteroid. We're going to do set angle of motion. Okay. And normally here you would just type in like a number of an angle that you'd want the asteroid to go, but we want to make it go towards the player. So to do that, we have to type a little equation in. So we're going to type in the word angle, and then we're going to type in a parentheses, and then we're going to type in asteroid. And once again, just start typing it and double click it. Asteroid, and we're going to do dot x, comma, asteroid dot y, comma, and then we're going to do spaceship dot x, and then spaceship dot y. Okay, and make sure you press enter or click on all those suggestions. Okay, so basically what this equation means, it's going to take the angle and it's going to compare the asteroid's x and y coordinate, compare it to the spaceship's x and y coordinate, and basically make it go towards it. So all you really need to know is this equation makes it so that the asteroid will set its angle of motion towards the spaceship's angle based on the x and y or position. Okay, so it's going to set the angle of motion towards the player. So that way, if the player, no matter where the player is, the asteroid by default is going to start flying at you. Okay. Then we're going to add another action, and we're going to set the asteroid's bullet speed to kind of be a random range. So that way, when all the asteroids spawn, they're not just static and all doing the same thing. We're going to randomize their speed so it seems a little bit more organic. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on asteroid, and we're going to do set bullet speed. So we're going to do, if I just type in bullet, then I see a set speed here under the bullet behavior. Okay. And remember, we have this asteroid max speed up here at equals 50. Okay. So we're going to use that right now. So we're going to type in the word random. And then we're going to do a parentheses, and we're going to do asteroid max speed minus 10, comma, asteroid max speed. And then a parentheses at the end. Okay. So basically, asteroid max speed is 50, right? So asteroid max speed minus 10 in this instance is 40, and asteroid max speed is 50. So basically what this is saying is it's going to set the speed to a random number between 40 and 50. That's all that this is. Now, I could in here, instead of doing this whole equation, someone might say, well, why don't you just say random 40 comma 50? Because that's the exact same thing. If you typed random 40 comma 50, it would do the same thing. The reason why it's nice to do it this way is because later on, if I change this max speed to a different number, it's going to go into the code. So if I want the max speed to be 100, then it's automatically going to go into the code, and now it's going to be a random between 90 and 100. So it just allows you to more easily adjust the game settings by doing it through a variable rather than just giving it a flat, like it's going to be this or nothing else. You know what I mean? So that's why we do that. Okay. And you can play, just so you guys know, when you're editing and creating these games, I'm not going to dock points if the settings aren't exactly the same. So like if you want a higher max speed, you want to play with some of these numbers, that's fine. As long as the core gameplay is working how it's supposed to, I'm okay if you change settings and properties. Okay. All right. So we've got all that. Next, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to randomize the rotate speed. And once again, that's just so that all the asteroids don't look the same. So we're going to add one more action here. We're going to do asteroid right here. We're going to type in rotate because it's going to be the rotate. And we're going to go under set speed, but under the rotate command. Because if you just type set speed up here, there's going to be like 3 or 4 different set speeds for different things. And you want to make sure you get the right one. So you want to do set speed under the rotate behavior. Okay. And we're going to set the speed to just be random. And we're going to do a parentheses, and it's going to be a random between 20 and 180. And this is just rotating at a rate of like pixels per second or degrees per second. So it's going to rotate between 20 and 180 degrees per second. Okay, so we've got that. So now we're good with the start events. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the spaceship movement group. So I'm going to open that up. I can minimize start events because I'm not using it. So that's just that black arrow there. I'm going to add an event to spaceship movement. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so the ship can spawn a bullet. Okay. So I'm going to add an event and I'm going to do keyboard. I'm going to do on key pressed. So before we did key is down, now we're going to do key pressed. There's a big difference between key pressed and key is down. I'm going to show you that in a second. We're going to do on key pressed. We're going to click the choose and we're going to press spacebar. Okay, so now it says keyboard on space pressed. Then we're going to add an action and we're going to tell the spaceship to spawn a bullet. So we click on the spaceship. We're going to say spawn another object. We're going to choose the bullet. And then for the layer, we're going to do main. So I'm just going to type in a quotation mark here. Okay, and image point 0 is fine. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then we're going to do another action here for bullet. And we're going to do something called move forward. So we're going to do move forward, and we're going to move forward 48 pixels. And I'll explain why we do that in a minute once we get it to work. So right now, even though we're telling it to spawn a bullet, if I were to run my game and press space, it wouldn't spawn a bullet. And the reason why is because a bullet does not exist on the layout. So we actually have to put one on. So let's drag a bullet onto the layout from the project window here on the right. Okay. And we have to give it two behaviors. So we're going to click on behaviors. We're going to give it bullet, obviously, because it's a bullet. And then we're also going to give it the destroy outside of layout behavior. So this behavior, if it ever leaves the layout, so if it enters this gray area, it's automatically going to get destroyed. Okay. That way we don't have bullets. Like if the bullet had wrap behavior, that would be really bad because the bullets would keep wrapping onto the screen and you just fill your screen with bullets. So, and that will obviously lag your game and cause a lot of problems. So destroy outside of layout. Now, if you remember with the asteroid, we wanted to destroy that right away on start. The bullet, we don't have to put that event in because as long as we put it off screen here, it has the destroy outside layout behavior already. It'll get destroyed automatically. So that should be okay there as well. All right, so let's try it out really quick. So if I go to if I just run my game here. So you'll see one asteroid spawn randomly off screen and it's flying towards me. And you can see I can press spacebar now to shoot the bullet. And that's all working. Right now the bullet isn't interacting with anything, but it's all good. Now notice each time I press space, it's going to spawn one bullet. Okay, that's because I did on key press, which means per key press, it will do it one time. Let me show you what happens here. If I change this to key is down, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to do key is down. A lot of people do this by mistake. If you do key is down, as long as space is down, it's going to constantly do this as much time as it can. Remember how we did this rotate without the delta time? It just spun like a buzzsaw. Well, same thing here with the bullet. If I hold space down, and I'll just show you really quick, you'll see it's going to spawn as many as it can. And you can already see I got like a little bit of lag there at the beginning because there's so many being spawned. Okay. So you really, excuse me, it's really important that if you want something just to be on a single key press, that you do on key pressed, not key is down. Okay, so we've got that. Oh, and then this bullet move forward 48 pixels. What that is if I run the game here, or if I double click my spaceship, on the left, you'll see something called an origin point. The origin point is the one pixel that's used as a reference for the XY position. And so when he spawned the bullet, it's going to spawn when we did the code, it said image point 0, which is the origin. So the bullet is spawning out of the middle of the ship, which looks really bad. So when we put that move forward 48 pixels, it means it's going to spawn, move forward 48 pixels, which puts it like right here, and then it spawns out of the tip of the ship. Now we can do the same thing. You don't have to do this. You can just watch me really quick. But another way to do it is we could actually just add an image point here. So in this image point window on the left, if you have this highlighted, I can just right click and add a new image point and I'll get this image point 1. And I can click and put that image point right on the tip of the gun. So then what I could do is on my event sheet, I don't need this move forward 48 pixels. And then when I have it spawn, I could just have it spawn from image point 1. So then what happens is when it spawns, It's going to look at image point 1 and it's just going to spawn the bullet right out of there. So that's another way you can do that. So if I run it, you'll see it comes right out of the front of the ship, just like before. This trick with image points is really useful because let's say I want to power up later on where the ship shoots bullet maybe out of these wingtips or out of other areas. I could add other image points and put them there and have bullets spawn from all those image points. So I'm not going to go too deep into that right now because that's more of a bonus thing. And I want to, in these sections, I really want to stay focused on the main game. But I wanted to demonstrate and explain why they had that in there. Okay. We're actually getting really, really close to the end here. So we're doing okay. We did that already. All right, so now we're going to go to the event sheet. We're just going to do like some quick collision events, and then we'll be done with section 1. So I'm going to minimize this group. We're going to right-click and make another group. And this one's going to be called Spaceship Handling. Okay. And this is where we're going to handle like spaceship collisions and things like that. And we're going to make an asteroid handling group as well to handle asteroid things. So let's add another group, and let's call it Asteroid Handling. Click OK. So we have a spaceship and an asteroid handling group. Okay, and then in the spaceship handling group, we're going to add an event here. We're going to do spaceship, and we're going to do on collision with another object. And you can just start typing that in. We're going to click, and we're going to choose the asteroid. So when the spaceship hits the asteroid, for now, what we're going to do is we are going to do spaceship. Sorry, I went a little bit fast there. We're going to do spaceship destroy. And we're going to do asteroid destroy. Now, later on in another section, we're going to actually add health to the spaceship. So later on, we're going to make it so you just lose health and not get destroyed. But for now, we'll just let them both get destroyed. Okay. And then the last event we're going to do for this section is we're just going to do a collision with the bullet to make the asteroid get destroyed. So we're going to go in the asteroid handling group, click here to add an event to it. We're going to do asteroid on collision with another object. And then we're going to choose bullet. And then we're just going to add an action, and we're going to do asteroid destroy. Okay, so now if you run the game, just test it out, but it should be the point where your ship can move, you can accelerate, you can brake, you can shoot bullets, and then you should be able to shoot and destroy the asteroid. Okay, and then if you want to try it again, you should also be able to collide with the asteroid as well. Just a quick note, I pressed F5. If you press F5, that's a quick way to just restart if you want to just like retry it. Okay, so that basically is it for section 1.